Welcome. My name is Megan, and I'm the Senior Program Associate for Tax Partnerships with the Cash Campaign in Maryland. I bet you're here because you signed up for Site Manager training and you're eager to find out what's going on. There are a few items on your checklist that need to be done before you attend training, so let's dive in and get you acquainted and ready to go. Today, you're going to learn how to get to TaxSlayer and the practice lab, how to start a new return, and then finally, we'll wrap up with a walkthrough of the first scenario, John Public. First things first, you're going to visit www.vita.taxslayerpro.com to access TaxSlayer, which is the tax preparation software used by our program. Pro tip, bookmark the page. That web address brings you here to the Vita Springboard or home page. Next, and I cannot stress this enough, click Practice Lab. As you can see from the descriptions, Pro Online is the version of the software that is for actual returns that you transmit to the IRS. So again, make sure you're in the practice lab testing environment and not in Pro Online. When you click on Practice Lab, you'll first be taken to the Access page, where you'll be prompted to enter a password. The password to access TaxSlayer's Practice Lab from this point on will always be Train Pro Web, in all caps, just as you see here. Then click Login. Next, you'll ignore all of this stuff down here and just click on Go to Practice Area like you see here. This is the Practice Lab. From here, you can start a new return or look up a return that you already started. And if you need to change the tax year, you can click Change Tax Year in the top right of the window. Now, let's get some practice by starting a new return for John Public, the taxpayer in scenario number 1. Click the Select button next to Start New 2021 Tax Return to get started. When you start a new return, the first thing that the software will do is prompt you to enter the taxpayer's Social Security number. So let's take a look at John Public's Social Security card. John's card says 63200XXX. The X's that you see are just a placeholder. When you see this moving forward, that means enter any 4 numbers of your choice. So here we go. I'm going to enter 632, and as you can see, the 00 is already there. And the middle 2 numbers will always be 00 for the primary taxpayer. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll just confirm it again. And then click Start Return. Now you'll see this message from TaxSlayer informing you that the software is very much so a work in progress at this point, so certain calculations are subject to change once the IRS finalizes instructions for the tax year. No worries, just click Continue and move on to the filing status screen. So what is John's filing status? Let's look back at our scenario. We see in our interview notes that John lives on his own and is single, so we are going to select Single for John's filing status in TaxSlayer. Then click Continue. Next up, we're going to enter the taxpayer's personal information. So we'll start by consulting the taxpayer's documents, which can include the Social Security card, photo ID, or the Form 13614C intake and interview sheet. So let's start by entering his name exactly as it appeared on his social. The Social Security number that we entered a moment ago is carried forward to this page, so no need to do anything here. And then you can find John's date of birth on his 13614C. It's 5/4/1999. So we'll enter that there. And then we can also see on his 13614C that he is a cashier. So let's go ahead and enter cashier here. To answer these questions, you'll need to consult the 13614C, and in real life, post-training situations, you'd also ask the taxpayer as well. See pages 1 and 3 of the 13614C and check each box accordingly. In John's case, none of these situations apply, so we do not need to check any boxes here. When you scroll down, you reach the address and phone number section. Once again, we're going to consult the 13614C to check John's address, and we type that in. And then once you enter the zip code, the city and state boxes will actually auto-populate. Double check anyway, just to make sure that it's correct. And the phone number we see on the 13614C as well, so enter that in there. And then a quick note about addresses. You may come across in training scenarios an address or a 13614C that has the address that looks like this, with your city in the city section, YS, or your state in the state section, and your zip in the zip code section. So whenever you see this in a scenario, you can get creative and enter whatever address you'd like. According to his documents and interview, John is single, he doesn't have any dependents, and he hasn't been issued an identity protection PIN by the IRS. So we can skip down to the recovery rebate credit screen. John indicated that he received a $1,400 economic impact payment last year. So we will indicate that he received the stimulus, and then we'll type in $1,400 here. When you're done entering recovery rebate info, click continue, and then that wraps up the basic information section. Now that we've entered all of John's basic information, we can move on to the income section. As you can see, the software lists several forms that income is commonly reported on, such as the W-2. Let's take a look at the scenario document and see what's up with John's income. He has a W-2 from Friendly Neighborhood Store, and he's got a bit of interest income reported on a 1099 INT as well. Let's double check that we've got everything we need by glancing at the second page of the 13614C intake sheet. We see that he had one job and the interest income, and no other forms of income in 2021. So we can move forward and begin by entering the W-2 into our software. Let's get started by clicking Begin in the W-2 section. This takes us to this screen, where we can enter the info that we saw a moment ago on John's W-2. Let's start by entering the Employee ID number, or EIN. You scroll down, and now we get to the Employer Information section. As you can see, most of this information was actually auto-populated because the software recognized John's employer's EIN. This isn't always the case, though, and when it's not, you just enter exactly what you see on the W-2. Now let's move on and start working on boxes 1 through 12 of the W-2. Let's type what we see in box 1 for wages, and then when you click away, you'll notice that boxes 3 through 6 actually auto-populate. However, as you can see on the W-2, these auto-populated values aren't always correct. Always be sure to enter what you see on the W-2 exactly into TaxSlayer. Take a moment to enter all of that in. And there are no values in boxes 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. So let's skip those and move on down to box 12. As we see on John's W-2, he has a code D in box 12A for the amount of $800, and the box for retirement plan is checked. So let's enter that into TaxSlayer exactly as we see it. And check that retirement plan box. For the state section, select John's state from the drop-down menu, and then type in the state's EIN, or employee ID number. At this point, the wages entered above on box 1 will actually auto-populate in box 16. So just finish up by entering the amount of state tax paid, and then click Continue on the bottom right of your screen to finish entering the W-2. Now you can see the W-2 that you just entered, and from this screen you can enter another one or delete one if needed, as well as click Continue to move on and enter more income. John also has a 1099 INT, which means that he received interest income. So start by finding the 1099 INT in the menu and click Begin to get started entering his 1099 INT in the software. Let's take a look at the document. As you can see, he has $25 of interest, and that's reported in box 1. And that was actually issued by the State Bank of Confusion. Now let's type exactly what we see on John's 1099 INT into the software. Now the interest income. And once you're done, just scroll down to the bottom right and click Continue. Now that we've entered all of John's income, we can move on to the next sections of the return. John doesn't have any additional tax documents to enter, so we can move on down to the next mandatory section, which is the health insurance section. John didn't have marketplace insurance, and his interview notes say that his employer provided his health insurance. So we're going to click no, and then we're going to click continue. Since the state section is being developed, we can skip that for now. Next up, let's go to the e-file section so we can enter his banking information and purchase his savings bond. This is the e-file screen. This is where you will select the federal return type from the drop-down menu. There are several options, as you can see. John presented us with a check and indicated that he would like direct deposit. So we will select e-file direct deposit for John. Next up, let's enter his bank account information from that check. We know it's a checking account, so the account type stays the same. Now let's type the rest of the details. And let's confirm those numbers again. Now we'll click Pull Refund up in the blue box in the top right. And the entire amount of John's refund is now pulled into here. But wait, remember John's interview notes? He wants to buy a savings bond worth $500. So if we scroll down until we reach the savings bond section, we'll see this. As you can see, the box is automatically checked where it says that he does not want to buy a savings bond for himself. Simply uncheck this box and then enter the $500 into the box below it where it says amount to be used for bond purchase for yourself. Now we actually have to go back to the bank information section because we have to change the refund amount now. So we actually have to reduce it by the $500 savings bond. So instead of $1,790, it should now say $1,290. Now that we've prepared John's return, let's take a look at the scenario questions. Number 1, what is John's filing status? As we discussed earlier, according to John's interview notes, he lives alone and doesn't have any dependents, so his filing status is single. However, if you're unsure about a taxpayer's filing status, you can refer to the Pub 4012, Section B8. Let's look at number 2. Is John eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit as a single filer? Let's refer to the 4012, page I2 to check. Let's start with Part A. John has a valid Social Security number. His filing status isn't married, filing separately. He is a U.S. citizen. He didn't earn any foreign income. His investment income does not exceed $10,000, and he is not the qualifying child of another taxpayer. So since everything checks out here, let's move to Part C over on the right, which is the rules if you don't have a qualifying child. So he is at least age 19, he cannot be the dependent of another person, he lived in the U.S. all year, and cannot be the qualifying child of another person, so that checks out as well. Let's move on to Part D, the income and AGI limitations. John's earned income is less than the limit for a taxpayer without a qualifying child, so that checks out as well. And this means that ultimately John is eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit. Question number 3 was, how much is John's Savers Credit and on what line of the 1040 does it appear? Let me first show you how to print the tax return. Go back into John Public's tax return in TaxSlayer. If you look at the navigation bar on the left side of the window, you'll see the return broken down by sections. Click on Summary Print, and that will take you to the screen that you see here now. Click Print Your 2021 Tax Return, and a separate window will appear with John's return. Scroll down to get to the part with the 1040 so that we can find his Savers Credit. Page 1 of the 1040 should look a lot like this, but let's take a look at page 2, which shows on line 20 the total amount of John's non-refundable credits, which gets calculated on Schedule 3. And we see here on line 4 that John's retirement savings contributions actually yielded him a $74 Savers Credit. So what is John's Savers Credit amount, and on what line of the 1040 does it appear? $74, and it's on line 20 of the 1040. All right, well done. Now that you're acquainted with TaxSlayer, go give the John Public scenario a try for yourself. You can do it. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much.